Welcome back to the afternoon of Protection Review 25. Before we move on to the brilliant ProtectX Live session this afternoon with Roger, where you'll hear from 7 different speakers, 7 different topics, but they've only got 7 minutes each, and there's no gaps. Before that, we're going to talk about the Protection Viewpoint report, which came out earlier this month. So to do that, please welcome to the stage Head of Policy at the Association of Mortgage Intermediaries, Stacey Penn. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Okay, so yes, you recently launched your 6th
Yeah, can you believe it?
6th Protection Viewpoint report. Let's begin with regulation. Regulation ranked as a key concern amongst advisors, quite understandably. From where you sit, what do you think are the most likely regulatory changes we can expect to see in the mortgage and protection sector?
Yeah, so it's clearly been a busy year for regulation. We've got the Pure Protection Market Study. We're still waiting to see where that's heading. But we've also had a lot of work going on in the mortgage space as well. We had earlier this year, the regulator launch a discussion paper on the future of the mortgage market. And that was a very deep and broad paper covering areas as diverse as later life to AI and selling and standards. And like on the protection market study, we are still waiting to see what's happening. We understand that there will be a feedback statement published by the regulator by the end of the year or before Christmas, we've been told. What that will do is essentially share all the views from industry and give us a bit of a flavour on what's happening next, which parts have they decided they're going to run with, which parts, based on the feedback, have they reflected and thought, okay, perhaps we'll row back on that. We've certainly had some concerns, and I know you touched upon it earlier today, around some of these proposals, some of these concepts, the risk of it diluting the role of advice and the accessibility of advice as well. So that's something at Amy we've very much, when we've been feeding in our thoughts, lobbying and championing that role of advice. And obviously there's the read across to protection as well, because we've got these 2 pieces of work going on. Our concern is if some changes do come in that restrict or more consumers decide to go execution only on their mortgage, we know that that is often a trigger for protection purchasing, which we saw in previous Amy Viewpoint reports. So we've been saying to the regulator, look, you need to be mindful that these 2 pieces of work in tandem, not against each other. Otherwise, we potentially are going to widen that protection gap.
Yeah, absolutely, I would agree. There's been a lot of discussion since the report came out about the role of insurer BDMs. And in the last few weeks, Protection Review thought we would ask advisors what they think about insurer business development managers. So we asked over 30 advice and distribution firms to rank their BDMs out of 10. The responses ranged from 1 to 10, which may not surprise you, with an average of 6 overall. How do you see that role evolving in the future, and how do you think insurers can improve on those scores?
Yeah, so I think it would be naive of us to not think that the role of tech will have a part to play in shaping that future BDM role. I think we've spoken about AI a lot today already, but I think that perhaps will have a place in doing more of that, I like to use the phrase heavy lifting. And I don't think that should be seen as a negative thing. Say if AI can do more handling queries on product or underwriting criteria, that will free up more time for the BDMs to do what they probably love and the parts they excel at, that human connection part. And it's almost kind of taking that role back to its roots. And I think BDMs that will excel in the future are those that are great at that emotional intelligence skill, so the empathy, self-awareness, relationship building. And in terms of the second part there, I think it's important for insurers to reflect on there is a difference between what advisors say they want and what they need from a BDM. So our research found 55% of advisors say they value BDM's product and policy knowledge. And I can see why in an advisor capacity, doing your day-to-day work, that is really, really beneficial. But actually what a lot of, from a business level, what a lot of businesses perhaps need is more of that strategic kind of bird's eye view on their business. So I think a good BDM, and there are lots out there already doing this, helping those businesses to drill down into data. We're a very data-driven industry, to look into those insights and help advisors spot those opportunities.
And do you think it's a two-way street in terms of the responsibility is not just on the insurer to say, look, we're here to help you. These are the services we can provide. This is the areas we can help your business. Is the onus also on the advisor and the advisor firm to not just ring up for underwriting updates and actually ask their BDM more challenging questions, should we say?
Yeah, definitely. I think it is a bit of both. I think there's responsibility on both sides. I think what perhaps could help advisors almost open their eyes to how extensive that BDM role is for insurers to share more case studies around how they've been able to support advisors beyond that product knowledge type question.
I think that's a good point, isn't it? You touched on AI earlier, and it featured prominently in the launch event a couple of weeks ago. We talked about how AI can take some of the heavy lifting off of advisors. Where do you see the biggest changes coming? And how do you think that we can implement AI without advisors losing that human touch?
Yeah, and it's a big question because AI is very much a hot topic at the moment. And certainly from my perspective, and you'll probably think, well, you will say this because you represent intermediaries, but I think AI has a place in assisting sales, but I think it's critical that that human advisor lens remains core. And that actually is backed up by some of our Viewpoint findings, where 71% of consumers said they value human connection when purchasing protection, and only 27% of consumers said they trust AI to make financial decisions. Now, naturally, that was a bit higher for some of the younger generations, which wasn't unexpected. But it is something we should think about, and it's already been talked about on the previous panel. How can we use AI to gain efficiency? And we do talk about this heavy lifting phrase, and rightly so, we've had the challenge back to us, well, what do you mean by this? Because advisors have to stand all over the advice process. So I think in terms of sharing practical examples, if we're looking at it from kind of that business perspective, and again, this just reinforces what's been said already, that AI can help with planning, help to analyze data and spot trends. And then I think if you drill it down in terms of how can advisors use AI, we are seeing generative AI being used, particularly with social media, to help spark ideas on content creation and help get the ball rolling. And I know we're going to speak in a bit about social media. But I think it is about this, how do we use it responsibly? The analogy I like, it's you're on a bike, the AI are your stabilizers. If you take those stabilizers off, you still want to have control.
Yeah, I think it's a valid point, isn't it? I think we said at the event that for me right now, AI, people fall into one of four camps. You've got the kind of la, not listening. You know, I tried ChatGPT a year ago, didn't like it. I haven't done anything else. Then you've got kind of Google Plus. You know, be using Copilot or Chat or anything else for things instead of Google, because you might as well. It's 100 times better and faster and quicker. Then you've got businesses that are genuinely integrating it into their proposition at the front end and the back end. And then you've got the game changers. You know, the people spending huge amounts of money, hundreds of billions, potentially changing the world. And yeah, you referred to social media there, and the research shows, despite some very prominent examples where advisors use social media quite a lot, most advisors aren't using social media. I remember at our Protect Z event, we were talking about Facebook, and one of our under 30 speakers described Facebook as somewhere where a shopping centre where you bump into your friends. And someone said, "You mean your mum's friends?" Which is incredibly funny. And so how do you think the industry can help advisors better utilise social media?
Yeah, so it's clearly an area where there's a lot of opportunity, and I think it will help tackle some of the areas we've identified in our Viewpoint research. And the figures that are using social media haven't really moved since we last asked that question back in 2023. So there's clearly some barriers in place. I think if I were to break that down into kind of 3 barriers from my perspective, I think one of them is probably the feeling of being overwhelmed. Like you said, there's so many different platforms out there. You do need to consider who the audience is on those platforms, what kind of messages might resonate best. I think the second point is confidence. It can be a lot for you to put yourself out there on social media, even if you're not the face of your social media content, even just crafting the content and kind of reflecting, how's this going to land? How's this perceived by customers and others in the industry? And then I think the third is, and again, this is something that's come up already today, is compliance as well. What are the processes, dependent on the type of firm you work for, whether you're directly authorised or a network, that you have to navigate. And perhaps it might actually be a bit more simpler than some people think, but that I think is perhaps a perceived barrier. I think in terms of how as an industry we can address some of those challenges, for me the first one is education. And there are a wealth of resources out there for people to lean on, whether it's within your firm or external businesses, or even things like YouTube and Google, where there's lots of tutorials. Something the other week I was helping put together some social media content for Amy, and yeah, there are a lot of good guides out there that can just help you break it down. And I think on the compliance part, interestingly, we have seen as part of this mortgages discussion paper work, the regulator has rightly challenged the mortgage sector on how do we rebalance our risk appetite. And that has led to some changes and led to some people to really think, are we being too risk averse? So I think that is the challenge out there, and social media moves so quickly, is getting that balance right between giving advisors the freedom to talk about what they want to talk about on social media, but rightly so being able to control that message to some extent. And then I think the final part is for people that are looking to get involved on social media is to have a plan. It doesn't have to be super complicated. I think it is about starting in the first place, consistent efforts, putting together that content plan. Where can you repurpose some of that content? For example, you might do a video that you can then use some of that on a carousel post. So yeah, it's clearly an area where there's more work to be done.
Yeah, I think if anyone's in doubt about social media, I do ask for help. There's plenty of people in the industry who can help you, including BDMs quite potentially. Remember that people follow people, less so companies and organisations. I'll mention no names, that there's large institutions in our industry that might have 10, 20,000 followers on Twitter, on TikTok, and I suspect most of those are staff, because who would follow a life insurance company on TikTok? But you'll follow a person, you'll follow an advisor who posts 20, 30-second clips once a week on things that we all need to know about.
Yeah, just on that point, because there is a link with AI as well. I think it's so important to be authentic in your content. I know it's something we've discussed before, that I think it's good to use AI to help shape some ideas, but I think you need to make sure that message really comes from you as a person and from the heart.
And we have regulatory support to an extent. The regulator is calling on our industry to have a larger presence on social media to drown out the bad actors and the influencers. So if there's people out there with a personality who know their onions, let's get talking. Okay, let's end then on one of the surprising things, maybe even disappointing things that came out of the research, was that most consumers don't see a future need for protection. Why do you think that view exists? Why did it come out now? And what can we do about it?
Yeah, so I'm going to come at it from a slightly different angle because I'd say I'm more a glass half full kind of person. So I think when you compare the levels of people that hold insurance versus the percentage that say they see a future need, I think that's a step in the right direction. I think there's a huge opportunity for advice there in helping those consumers see that future need, particularly the younger generation. We know from Viewpoint research that the younger generation are more curious and more engaged on protection. I think just generally people find it very hard to think ahead to the future. We see that with things like saving for retirement. It's the reason why pensions auto-enrollment has come in. So I think it is more, let's keep doing what we're doing, making sure we're nailing the foundations. So ensuring how we're considering how we integrate protection conversations alongside mortgages, how we're ensuring those conversations are memorable and resonate. But I do think there perhaps is a role for kind of positive nudges as well. Something Amy has called for as part of the mortgage discussion work is the ESIS document that you get with your mortgage. It says about buildings insurance, but we have said we feel there should be something in there around, have you thought about other insurances like protection, to help people see that link.
Thank you. If anybody wants to know more about this year's Viewpoint report, please come and ask Stacey, and please put your hands together. Thank you.
Thank you.